Iraq, 1991, deep behind enemy lines. 8 members of Britain's elite Special Operations Regiment, the Special Air Service, fight for their lives.
The Iraqis were firing at us, we were firing back at them, they were firing at each other.
The fate of the Allied coalition hangs in the balance.
I believe that Israel threatened to use nuclear weapons.
Over the next few days, their mission will turn into a disaster. Some of the men will be killed. Others will try to escape by walking 200 miles across the Iraqi desert, leaving in their wake an estimated 200 Iraqi dead and wounded.
I've smelled dead bodies before, and I could smell it on me. There was just this rotting stench.
Some will endure appalling torture at the hands of their captors.
It's that instant pain.
It's quite unnerving to be by yourself, knowing that everybody out there wants to kill you.
Using the survivors' first-hand accounts, this film reveals the details of their mission. An extraordinary test of bravery and endurance. They are the men of call sign Bravo 20. This is their story. Members of Britain's elite Special Operations Unit, the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, or SAS, prepare to deploy behind enemy lines deep inside Iraq.
Every individual knew that we shouldn't have been going in on what we had, but we were all prepared to get on that helicopter and go for it. This was our chance, and nobody was going to be left behind.
It was a slight relief, in fact, that all of the preparations had been done. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll find out sooner or later. But it's done, and let's just get on with it.
The Bravo 20 patrol is led by Sergeant Andy McNabb.
All 8 of us were sitting in the Chinook, just sat there in their own little worlds, really, thinking whatever they thought, whether they were excited or scared or apprehensive or whatever.
Today, Andy McNabb cannot be identified as a result of various undercover missions he participated in during the years of his service with the SAS. Unarmed and without escort, a Royal Air Force Chinook helicopter carries the patrol into Iraq. Corporal Chris Ryan is one of the other senior members of the team.
You're in the helicopter here, and from my point of view, you've got no control over the traveling from A to B, so you just want to get this bit over. The game started now, and you're in motion, and just get the job done.
Chris Ryan is the only surviving patrol member able to talk about his experience in Iraq. The other men would face prosecution by the British government if interviewed.
It's very cramped, very noisy, very hot. I think everybody's emotions were up and down because of how chaotic it had been to get this patrol mounted.
Under the code name Operation Desert Storm, the liberation of Kuwait has begun.
Just 5 days earlier, waves of British and American warplanes began bombing Baghdad and targets throughout Iraq. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein retaliated by firing Scud missiles.
missiles have fallen in Tel Aviv. Their third one is in the air. The civil defense here is telling everyone to put their gas mask on and go into a sealed room.
Under the very real threat that the Scud missiles could carry chemical or biological warheads, Israel made it clear to then-President Bush that the Scud attacks had to be stopped.
The Israelis told us at the highest levels that if we didn't stop those Scuds from shooting, they were going to go in and do it. They couldn't tolerate that.
Suddenly, the stakes could not have been higher.
I believe that Israel threatened to use nuclear weapons in retaliation to a Scud attack, say, that carried biological or chemical warhead. And as a result of that, I could see why the immense pressure was put on us about the Scud missiles. So I think that is the importance of the Scud missile. I think that is the true secret of why stopping them was so important.
Despite all of the aircraft and technology at his disposal, General Horner could not find and destroy the mobile Scud launchers. They were too well camouflaged or shielded by the poor weather and lost in the vast Iraqi desert.
We, from the very beginning, put all the available force that would have any impact that was within our capability against the Scuds. Unfortunately, that force was not adequate to the job. We could not stop the Scud launches. We had to find some new way to come to grips with this problem. And of course, that's where ground forces come into play.
This is G. George, mission across the border, over.
It was just getting to the last line because we wanted to use the maximum amount of darkness when we got over the border.
Roger, understood. Proceeding across the border, over. Roger that, metal road, 2 miles. Let's go up, 200 feet. Okay, got it, visual.
Once we flew over the Iraqi border, we had to climb quite high to get over a dual carriageway to hide our noise. And we got illuminated by a Roland missile.
They've seen us. Braking left, braking left, braking left.
For me,
Right
having
down
the headphones on, it got me flapping big time.
I can't shake it off. It's getting closer. Stand by, stand by.
We had lock-on from a missile site where the helicopter came down, hovered for a while.
And they started taking evasive action. The voice procedure never changed on the net. It was, braking left, braking left.
The Chinook flies deeper and deeper into Iraq. The men inside span a range of ages, skills, nations, and experience.
Andy McNabb, he was the patrol commander. I knew him quite well, quite an outwardly going guy, very professional.
I basically grew up in South London in a housing estate. The American equivalent would be a project housing. I got arrested when I was 16 for breaking and entering in houses. When I went to the juvenile detention system, that at that time was called the Borstal. Basically, if you join the army, well, you get out of Borstal, so that was it.
From 24-year-old Bob to 36-year-old Vince, former paratroopers, infantrymen, and a Marine all have specialist skills: medic, marksman, or explosives expert. One is a New Zealander, another South African, known around town as Dr. Sex. Another is a loner.
Another member of the patrol we had, who was a corporal by then, was Chris.
I'd been in the regiment since 1984. My parents were ordinary working class folk, weren't very wealthy. And it was always my ambition to join the army because I saw it as a means of travelling and getting away. Because we couldn't afford to go on holiday, the only way I saw of travelling the world was to join the army.
Half of them are parents. Most are married. Together, a tough and disciplined SAS team.
We knew each other. We'd all worked together. We'd all been on the anti-terrorist team for 6 months before that. They're a good bunch of guys.
Stand by, 2 minutes to land. That's 2 minutes.
Before we landed, all of the equipment was pushed onto the tailgate of the Chinook.
All clear. 30 seconds. Descending now. 30 seconds. Open rear door.
The second in command of the patrol is SAS veteran Sergeant Vince Phillips.
Go, go, go.
Vince and his three-man team, they were going to go out of the dust cloud to put out protection. My job then is to make sure that we've got all the equipment off. You jump off and they go. There's no ceremony about it at all.
You get into a defensive position, the bird takes off. And you just let everything settle down. There's a lot of dust. First thing that I realised that it was quite cold. It was freezing. There was a stiff wind blowing.
Then everything became silent for a while. And there is a time where you just stay there and tune in, because you're starting to get your night vision. So you're just looking where everybody else is. We then saw things that shouldn't be where we landed. That's why we landed there, hopefully being desolate. We started to see trees in a plantation that was cutting the horizon. You then hear a dog in the distance. There shouldn't be this activity around. 9 out of 10 times, if there's an animal, there's going to be humans.
There was no other noise, the dog settled down, so we basically got our equipment, which was in excess of probably £350 per man, and then we started to ferry it, just like a bunch of Sherpas moving it. Soon became apparent at this point that we weren't going to dig in. The ground that we were on was flat bedrock, and it was quite open, and there was no vegetation to hide behind.
The foot patrol moves across the desert that night until they find a dry riverbed, or wadi, to hide in. This would be their lying up point, or LUP, for the daytime. From here, they would observe the nearby highway and report on any Scud activity.
So we then moved in to this LUP, which did give us quite a bit of cover, actually.
It wasn't ideal conditions because it was quite close to the road. We were open to the elements, and if anybody had come walking in there, they would have spotted us straight away.
But when Stephen Lane, the patrol signaller, nicknamed Legs, sets up the radio to report in, he can't get through. The patrol has been given the wrong frequencies. They have no way to communicate with base.
We start hearing a bell, like a cowbell. It was up there somewhere behind us. The bell got sort of noisier. Vince came up to have a look of what was going on. And he said, "What's goats?" It's a load of goats coming up with a kid.
One of the lads then had said that he'd locked eyes on him.
So we had to take it as a compromise. We have to get out. We have to get out. You're compromised, that's it. There's nothing you can do. We stayed out of a couple of hours before last light. So people got their Bergens on, checking their weapons. People getting a lot of fluids down them as well, because then we know that we're going to have to start making distance now to get out.
We decided to put shamags on. Shamag is about a metre square length of cloth. Arabs wear them as a headscarf. We decided to wrap them around our head as a bluff.
Patrol started to move out, heading down towards the helicopter pickup point.
The patrol works to a predetermined procedure. If Bravo 20 has not been heard from for 48 hours, they are to be collected by helicopter. The 48 hours would be up that night. They now head for the designated emergency rendezvous point.
I was in front. I looked up to my left. And there was two guys there. I lifted my left hand above my head. As soon as I waved at them, they opened up.
Covering fire!
We returned fire at these two guys.
Down!
At the same time, a dumper truck turned up and guys started spilling out the back of the dumper truck.
To our left, there was the sound of armour, but no one could see it. I certainly couldn't see it. And there's a decision to be made. What are you going to do? Are you going to now run? There's nowhere to run. So all you've got to do is just stand your ground, which we've done. And far down on the left-hand side, a 66 went off. What you want to do is actually get a spade out and dig a big hole and disappear.
The SAS Bravo 20 patrol has been compromised by Iraqi soldiers and is on the run, hundreds of miles behind enemy lines. Sergeant Andy McNabb and Corporal Chris Ryan are very much following in the footsteps of their predecessors, the men who first created the Special Air Service 50 years earlier.
An interesting aspect of the Special Air Service in the Gulf War was it was sort of a return to their roots. They were formed in the Western Desert during World War II to carry out long-range patrols behind German lines.
Created by Lieutenant David Sterling in 1941, the SAS invented what we now call Special Operations. The regiment, as the SAS is known, pioneered unorthodox tactics and the use of elite soldiers to fight behind enemy lines. Leading the way in fighting guerrilla movements throughout the world, the regiment remained largely unknown to the public until 1980. That May, the SAS spectacularly ended a terrorist takeover of the Iranian embassy in London, killing the gunman, rescuing the hostages. Numerous missions in the 1982 Falklands War and controversial action in Northern Ireland kept the SAS in the headlines.
I think the Special Air Service deserves its reputation as one of the world's great special operations units. Probably the best comparison with the U.S. Special Forces to the Special Air Service is Delta Force. They're organized very similarly, and they have very similar missions.
For the British Gulf commander and former head of the SAS, General de la Billière, the SAS was the logical solution to the problem of who should go scud busting. With U.S. Special Operations Forces tied up on other missions, and Commander-in-Chief Norman Schwarzkopf opposed to their use behind Iraqi lines, General de la Billière suggests the SAS be deployed at once.
Now, I can tell you, this is a very difficult sell because General Schwarzkopf was not enamored with Special Operations Forces. It was the special relationship between de Villiers and Schwarzkopf that really made the difference, that carried the day. He was able to convince Schwarzkopf to let him try, at very high risk, to a small number of Special Air Service forces, to go into Iraq and work with the Air Force overhead to stop the Scuds.
When they asked me about using the UK Special Forces on the mission, I said absolutely. I mean, you know, we know these people, we've trained with them, we've worked with them, we know them personally. They're absolutely top drawer.
Just over the hill.
There was confusion, it seemed, on both sides.
Next, to your left! Drop down!
I don't think they could see half of us as it all kicked off, because they were firing crazily anyway. Just blatting away, and the rounds were going sort of everywhere.
All I knew was they were in uniforms, they had weapons, and they were firing at us.
Somebody there, which is the commander, has got to make a decision. Are you going to run? Are you going to go forward? What are you going to do? Because otherwise, what happens? Everybody's staying still.
Leaving their Bergen backpacks behind, the patrol advances into the Iraqi positions.
We fought forward. Fought forward. There's more 66s going off.
They smoke!
What it is going forward, getting them flapping as much as us. So we can reorganise and run.
Over here! On me! On me!
At this point, we started pulling back, moving back in bounds of about 2 or 3 meters. I can remember seeing tracer fire going over the tops of the guy's head. And then turning around, returning fire. At that point, we were absolutely exhausted. I was sure one of the guys would have been hit, and through good luck, everybody came together.
From that point, it's just running down to get to the Bergens, to run away.
There was quite an intense amount of fire coming down.
It was time to dump the Bergens. You don't have to give these orders, they know it. You know, it's time to dump the Bergens.
I was making a conscious note of what was in my Bergen, and for some unknown reason, all I thought of was this hip flask. I had a hip flask in there that had whiskey in, and it had been given to me at Christmas. So I ran back, and as I was putting my hand down to open the clasps, the Bergen just moved back, and it was hit.
There was a scream, and I looked round, and I saw Chris and his Bergen sort of spin in the air and go down. So straight away, we thought that he'd been dropped.
And I can remember looking through the peripheral vision and seeing large splashes in the ground. Got my hip flask and then just started walking up. I couldn't physically run anymore. And I got parallel with the patrol commander, Andy McNabb, and we started laughing at this, and we both took a drink.
He was working on the basis, if he got back without it, his wife would kill him, let alone the Iraqis.
The team heads for the predetermined rendezvous point, where they expect an RAF helicopter to come and pick them up.
We got to the pickup point. There was no sign of any helicopter coming in.
The promised rescue helicopter never even takes off from its base in Saudi Arabia. The patrol is on its own.
And we started to then head north. And a couple of members of the patrol were starting to suffer.
Mal, the South African-born trooper, collapses with severe dehydration. Vince has injured his leg in the firefight. Alone, lightly armed, supporting injured men, the Bravo 20 patrol is stranded, nearly 100 miles from the closest friendly nation. What does headquarters know of their position? Is help on the way? Does anyone even realize they're still alive? After their discovery by Iraqi soldiers, the British SAS Bravo 20 patrol is on the run, 100 miles behind Iraqi lines. Just 6 days earlier, the SAS deployed to their frontline base in Saudi Arabia. It was the same day the first Scud missiles fell on Israel. They now had their mission.
We were all based on an airfield. There was a hangar there, and we got a fastball. Behind the scenes, we were told that General de Villiers was trying to persuade General Schwarzkopf to get the regiment behind the lines.
Certainly our hangar that we lived in, it looked like a warehouse, and there was boxes everywhere that we were moving around to make sort of small rooms. It was just kit everywhere, and people were trying to improvise.
Andy and Chris's team was one of the first SAS units given the job to go into Iraq.
There was 3 patrols that were going out onto the ground. Bravo 10, Bravo 20, Bravo 30. It was basically a radio call sign. It just simply means it's B Squadron, the 2nd patrol.
So we were tasked pretty quickly to put an observation post inside of Iraq with the idea of locating Scud missiles.
That's all it was about. Just get out there and stop the Scuds firing.
But as soon as Andy and Chris began their hasty planning for the Scud busting mission, things started to go wrong.
We had no mapping. And in fact, our escape maps that we were given, which were made in 1951, the copyright belonged to the Water Board of Iraq. So everything was very old.
We'd been given satellite photographs. They were quite old, and we had interpreted them the wrong way around.
They had just 3 days to make a plan of action and gather the equipment they required. The patrol quickly decided not to take any vehicles into Iraq, thinking they could conceal themselves better without them. They would now lack the ability to escape quickly and the extra firepower provided by the armed Land Rovers.
The consideration to take vehicles or not wasn't a major deal at that time. It was one of the considerations. I was actually more worried about the lack of explosives and pistols, quite frankly.
There was one pistol within the patrol. The squadron's pistols had disappeared at some point in transit.
The patrol still had its automatic weapons.
The regiment, in those sort of conditions, will use the Colt M16 family, the M203 with the 40mm grenade launcher.
We had Minimes. That was the heavy gun within the patrol. We had a number of Minimes.
But even finding ammunition would prove a challenge.
I can remember going around guys in A Squadron, D Squadron, and asking them for 2 or 3 grenades. Going around asking them for armor-piercing rounds.
We had to make our own Claymore mines to supplement the manufactured ones. And basically we was just going to the cookhouse and we were getting the ice cream cartons, and we would be filling them with scrap metal and nuts and bolts, anything we could find as a projectile, and then using normal plastic explosives to make our own claymore mines.
In ideal conditions, we would have been able to order whatever weaponry we wanted, but this was not. It was crisis management. Weapons had gone missing. We just basically had to beg, steal and borrow.
So there was a shortage of everything. But the argument is, you know, you've got to improvise, you've got to get on. They teach you how to improvise. They expect you to improvise, and now's the time to do it.
The limited intelligence and lack of planning time leave the Bravo 20 patrol to rely on their own internal resources as they struggle against conditions in Iraq.
Weather started to get quite bad. There was a lot of wind, but you know, that cold wind that was coming through.
We decided we'd just put our heads down, backsides up and walk as hard as we could, and that's what we did. And we walked for about an hour.
All of a sudden there were jets coming from the north. And I had to make a decision. You know, do I get hold of on my TACB to talk to these jets? They could be American jets coming from Turkey.
A TACB, or tactical beacon, is a short-range distress radio tuned to Air Force frequencies.
We fumbled to try and get the TACB out, pulled the TACB and started talking. Any call sign, this is Bravo 20, we're a ground sign, we're in trouble. Over. What came back, very weakly, was an American voice.
Hello, Bravo 20. Say again, over.
This is Bravo 20, we're a ground call sign, we're in trouble. Over. And then it all went crackly and these jets went off.
It will be the only contact the unit has with the U.S. aircraft.
But the good thing was, number one, it was an American voice. Number two, it'll get reported. You know, they know that we're still alive. They know that we're in trouble. And we were in trouble because what had happened is the patrol had split into two. Chris as the lead scout, Mal and Vince had split from me. And it was my fault. In the dark, literally within sort of 10 meters you've gone, there's no ambient light, there's no starlight, you're not going to find these people. There's not a lot you can do. You can't use white light, you're not going to shout. So there's nothing but we can do is just keep on going forwards. As a patrol commander, severely pissed off.
After being discovered and then hunted by Iraqi soldiers, the SAS Bravo 20 patrol realizes its only way to freedom is a 75-mile trek to Syria. But the worst has happened. In a storm, the group has split in two.
I was aware, obviously, of Mel being right behind me and then Vince. And when I turned round, the rest of the patrol was missing. I had night sight and I couldn't see anything back right across the desert floor. We couldn't see the rest of the guys. We were all to blame, not for looking round. When Andy McNabb, who'd actually gone to ground, he should have made sure Vince had heard him when that patrol had stopped. It was basically a mistake, and it was just something we had to live with.
Chris Ryan now leads one half of the unit, Andy McNabb the other.
During that night, we started moving to a more flat terrain and very hard, windswept sand and no cover. As we carried on, what we needed to find was somewhere to hide up in the day, because you're not going to be moving in the day, you're going to hide up, use the night to carry on moving.
We'd moved all that night, and the ground that we crossed was very flat, and it was made up of a lot of sharp rocks about the size of your fist, and we all got badly blistered feet.
Then we started to have sleet, and within maybe 40, 45 minutes, we started to have snow. And it was ridiculous. There was snow in the desert. And being so far up north, it was the worst weather they had apparently for 30 years.
Well, I've worked in the Arctic quite a lot. I'm a fully qualified mountain guide, and I was worried now. We couldn't feel our hands. The cold was in your legs and your thighs and your spine, everything.
As they lie there freezing, their thoughts turn back to the briefings and intelligence they'd gotten about conditions in the desert.
The information that we were receiving prior to insertion was very limited. Our INT guys came up and they had very little information on the area. They couldn't tell us anything about the weather.
The information we was given about the weather conditions up in that part of the country for January was temperate European type weather.
I asked if they knew what the borders were like. It came up blank, they didn't know. So we were going in pretty much blind.
Based on this information, the weather barely got a second thought as the men walked out to the Chinook.
One of the guys, Mick, who I'd done selection with, he said, listen, look, do you want a picture taken just in case nobody comes back anyway, and we can always sort of, send it to the families.
This last photograph, taken of the group together, shows them all wearing lightweight smocks. Warm Saudi sunshine, several even took their cold weather gear and sleeping bags out of their Bergen backpacks. The mistake will cost them dearly.
The snow was coming down. All we had on us was our cotton desert uniform getting covered in snow. So it was just being dressed for a spring day, European sort of winter.
We didn't have any equipment, we didn't have any waterproofs, and here we are in the middle of the desert with a very high wind chill factor, soaking through to the skin, and there's nobody coming to help us.
We were still wearing shemags, trying to retain body heat, and the shemags that around the face started to freeze, and you could break off the ice.
New Zealander Mike Coburn, who navigates for McNabb's group, begins to decline.
And he was starting to go down with hypothermia, certainly not in that drastic way of just going down, but he's sort of, he's mature enough to say, look, I think I'm getting a problem here.
Hypothermia now becomes a serious threat to them all. Standard operating procedure means a patrol will never light an open flame because it could be seen. But without one, there's no way to make a hot drink.
So people took the risk of compromise and of capture to get a brew on for Mike, and for us as well. Of course, we wanted some as well, but there was a higher priority. Personally, at that stage, it was quite desperate in the way that you got, the patrol split, guys starting to suffer from hypothermia. Everybody knew at some stage, if we don't get killed by the Iraqis, chances are we're going to get killed by the weather if we don't actually crack on and make it to the border. And we carried on going on our bearing. Horrendous wind started to get us now, and we were wet. Fingers were very numb, and you were sort of cradling weapons as opposed to holding them. Just keep your head down out of the wind.
In Chris's group, the already injured Vince Phillips deteriorates in the near Arctic conditions.
We'd been walking, and Vince kept dropping behind. We were coming into areas where the snow had drifted. Vince said he couldn't feel his hands and he couldn't carry his weapon. Mel took Vince's M16. At some point during that night, Mel had said, "We've lost Vince." We backtracked and we started walking back into the storm.
They search for Vince, but cannot find him.
I was in charge of it, so I made the decision to pull away and leave him. We all knew what the risks were, and that it was just one of them things. You don't feel great, but you can't sit there playing with your emotions. You've got to tuck them away and get the job done. It's hard, you're leaving a colleague behind, he's going to die, but at some point, the pair of us were going to go down. I can't lay the blame at anybody else's doorstep apart from myself, because it was me that made the decision.
Sergeant Vince Phillip dies that night from exposure. He is the first SAS fatality on the Bravo 20 mission. He will not be the last. During another freezing night on the run behind Iraqi lines, Andy, along with Mike, Bob, Legs, and Dinger, one of the two separated groups from the SAS Bravo 20 patrol, push on for the Syrian border and safety.
I think the training in the regiment helped cope with the moment very well. As an infantry soldier, since the age of 16, I've been used to being wet, cold, and hungry. That's part of a soldier's life. So those conditions are not totally alien. It's not about strength, it's about stamina. I thought I was as prepared as I ever was going to be, and confident that I'd get into Syria.
Mal and Chris, the two surviving members of the other part of the patrol, make their own way toward the Syrian border, over 80 miles away.
We probably covered another 35 miles that night. It was freezing cold, we were soaking. We just kept walking until first light. The sun came up. It wasn't enough to make you feel comfortable, but it was enough heat so you could get your feeling back in your hands.
A few hours later, they hear the now familiar sound of a goat's bell.
We'd been compromised by a young goat herder, and initially I wanted to kill the guy. Mel's a gentleman, and he made the right decision not to do it. Because you can't go around killing, every civilian that you come up against. He wanted to go off to see if he could find a vehicle. I was against it. He started to walk off with the young goat herder. Now, it was a decision. I could have ordered him to stay with me and not to move, but we were in escape and evasion. If he got a vehicle and drove out, then, all the best to him. But it was his decision to leave.
By sunset, Mal has failed to return.
And then a set of vehicle lights started heading directly towards the wadi. The first set of lights were followed by a second set. They were coming in on an axis straight for me. So I got the 203 grenade ready. I opened the 66 up. opened up with the 203 grenade onto the second vehicle, moved forward and put a burst into each vehicle. There was no fire returned from them. Kept moving as hard as I could from that point.
Chris doesn't know if Mal is a prisoner or free, dead or alive. Miles away, having spent the previous night avoiding Iraqi patrols and almost getting caught, Andy's group decides they need to cover some real ground to get to Syria before they are seen or die of exposure. They settle on an innovative approach: carjacking.
I came up with the idea, let's hit a wagon. We could get to the border in an hour and a half, nothing. We decided we're going to do it. Then the plan was quite simple. Myself and Bob Consiglio, Bob was going to lean against me as if he's injured, and I'm going to wave down with a white light torch a vehicle.
24-year-old Bob Consiglio, with just a few months in the regiment, helps Andy stop a car.
It was fantastic getting in the vehicle, because the first thing that went on was the heaters.
Dinger, another veteran soldier and father of two, eagerly seizes his first opportunity to smoke a cigarette.
He was lighting up, it was getting all smoky in there, and the heat was blasting. And the smell of the clothes, all that wet, musty smell. It was great, not only because of the warmth, but the feeling of movement, of moving at speed and being so close, because you're going to get to the point where you could be able to taste the border. It was that air of confidence that we're nearly there, we're nearly there. We had to abandon the taxi when we hit a permanent vehicle checkpoint. And there was Iraqi soldiers who were coming down, not checking for us. They were actually very casually walking down, just talking with people. But it will be a point where we get to us. So what happened was Steve Lane initiated the contact. Just to get everybody's heads down so we can run.
Go, fight!
Chris scans the desert for any activity as he walks on, alone.
The quality of the maps that I had, I couldn't actually do any map reading, so it was basically following the line of the Euphrates, and then I could keep bouncing off the Euphrates to replenish my water. I didn't have any food, and just basically keep heading west until I hit the border. I knew it was probably about 70 to 80 miles. I had the patrol night sight, and it was invaluable. It was probably the best piece of equipment that I had. I would periodically just look through it. If there was a military vehicle, you could pick it up. If anybody was smoking, you would pick the light up. That actually saved me quite a number of times.
Andy's group is now only about 7 miles from the Syrian border.
And we were still at that point, we were still 5 men. I was up the front, Mike was with me. And that's when the contact started. It was just chaos, absolute chaos. The Iraqis were firing at what they thought were pockets of us. We were firing back at them. They were firing at each other. People got split in slurs. Myself and Mike. Bob Consiglio on his own. And Steve Lane and Dinger. So there was that time during this contact that was going on where Bob got killed. I could hear his minimi going. That stopped. Then there was more gunfire. And then that stopped. Myself and Mike, we still carried on forward. And up on the high ground, you could actually see the lights of Syria. As we come up the road, lots of shouting and an AK went off. Just meters away. In my head at that time, as far as I was concerned, he was dead because he dropped.
Thinking Mike and Bob have been killed, and with Legs and Dinger missing, Andy runs for the border, now only a mile away.
And it was starting to get first light. I'm actually thinking, well, am I the only one who's going to make this here? So I found a drainage culvert, and I just got myself tucked in there. And all I was going to do was wait till last light. Once I got in there, and it was very sort of confined, I felt quite confident. By 3 o'clock, that was it. 3 more hours to go, I've cracked it. A vehicle started approaching. Then it was obvious there was more vehicles behind. But there was nothing new. This has been going on all day. But this time they stopped.
From the initial team of 8 men, only 2 members of the SAS Bravo 20 patrol remain alive and free behind Iraqi lines. Separately, both are trying to reach safety in Syria.
It didn't hit me until the following morning that I was by myself, and that's when, if there was any emotions or fear, it kicked in. I thought back to things that my mum had said to me when I was, at school, and one thing she said: if everything gets on top of you, just have a good cry. And I tried to cry, and I couldn't, and I ended up laughing, and I was lying in a waddy bed, laughing my head off. And at that point, the fear, the anxiety, everything left me. I checked my feet, and my toenails were all coming off. The blisters were starting to look as if they were infected. It was just a case of trying to keep them clean.
I was captured about 4:30 on that day. And there was this moment of trying to bluff myself, saying, no, they're just getting out to do stuff, they don't know I'm here. But then they just started firing into the ground around the culvert. And they obviously wanted me to come out, but I weren't coming out, they'll have to drag me out.
Andy is taken to an army base where he locks eyes on Dinger, whom he last saw in the previous night's gun battle.
And as I got dragged out, I saw Dinger. His head as big as a football. He'd had his ear nearly cut off.
Dinger had been captured that morning.
It was actually a strangely comforting feeling to know that someone else was there, opposed to just me.
It is quite unnerving to be by yourself, knowing that everybody out there wants to kill you, and you've got no friends, and nobody's coming to help you. I could describe every place I laid up for that period of time, waiting for nightfall. Walking again. Lying up. Lying still on rock for 12 hours becomes very uncomfortable. My feet just got worse and worse as the days went on. I was losing weight rapidly because I wasn't eating, because of the cold. It was the coldest winter Iraq was having in 30 years. And then the amount of ground I was covering every night, the weight was just coming off me.
It's now known that some of the patrol's garbled radio signals from 3 days earlier did reach SAS headquarters, but the information was incomplete. In essence, the team simply vanished. A night after everyone in the group except Chris were either killed or captured, an Anglo-American rescue mission is finally sent to look for them. 2 helicopters scoured the most likely route the patrol would take to Saudi Arabia in the south. But in another of the mission's catalog of errors, the rescuers have not been told that in fact the team planned to head north for Syria. The searchers find no trace of them. It is the 11th night of the unrelenting coalition bombing of Iraq.
They're getting bombed every night, and they're taking civilian and military casualties. And there I am. So you can take your frustration out.
During the next night, Chris Ryan finds a small stream near some buildings.
It was clear water that was running through this, and it had whitewashed the bottom of the stream bed. And I presumed it was a spring. Now, the water I'd been drinking from the Euphrates was dirty, it was black, filthy water. So I filled my water bottles up, and I didn't taste the water at the time, and then moved out of this area.
As dawn approaches, Chris takes refuge in a drainage culvert under a road.
I went to take a drink of water, and it burnt my mouth. And it had like a metallic and lemon type of taste. Now, my gums were receding anyway, and they were bleeding quite bad, but this stung my mouth, and I couldn't understand what I'd had in my water bottle to change the taste of this, because this water was crystal clear.
Only later does Chris discover what he'd been drinking.
I'd ended up in a chemical processing facility, and it was described to me afterwards as a yellow cake processing facility, a nuclear plant.
Having been moved between a series of army camps and received a number of beatings, Andy and Dinger are finally taken to a secret military facility in the Iraqi capital.
When I arrived at the interrogation center in Baghdad, straight away I knew that, in severe trouble.
Every decision I made, I would sit down and have a conversation with myself and double check that it was the right decision, constantly talking to myself. Physically, you're taking the punishment and the pain every night. And then from a mental point of view, you have to drive yourself on and rise above any pain and just try and numb your brain. I started collapsing, hallucinating, and it had been like a sleep deprivation exercise. You couldn't physically sleep, it was too cold. You would nod off for 10 minutes and you'd wake up shaking violently. You would just go straight into like a deep dream. There was periods of time where my daughter would come out in front of me. I could even hear the rocks, moving on her feet. And putting her hand out, and I was trying to grab her hand. I knew she wasn't there, but there was this image there, and you know, I was mesmerized by it and trying to get a hold of her.
There was no noise, no shouting, no noise, nothing. I was blindfolded. And it just felt not good, not good at all. It was, you knew it was sort of serious time. And it was an interrogation centre, because what they're trying to do is instill fear, which they did, without a doubt.
Seven days after they are dropped behind Iraqi lines, the 8-man SAS Bravo 20 patrol has been separated after a running battle with the Iraqis. Some of its members are dead, others missing. Chris Ryan is alone, struggling to cross the Iraqi desert. Andy McNabb and Dinger are prisoners of war.
I got moved to an interrogation centre with Dinger in Baghdad. The actual cells were quite old and decayed. The walls were blood-stained. There's guys who engraved pictures on there. Somebody's written in English, a dedication to his son that he's never going to see again. Nobody wore watches, nobody spoke when they come into the cells. So you couldn't tell the time, you had no idea of the day or nothing. It's all it was, your little world. Nobody knows whether we're alive or dead. Okay, they had the TACB signal from the American pilot, but nothing happened from that. And it was a routine as part of the system to come in and beat you up. And at one stage, the blindfold was pulled off, and I saw the hook up in the ceiling. Which got me totally worried, for days and days about that. And I got picked up and taken into an interrogation room. Strangely, going into an interrogation room, for that first second was actually nice because it was warm and you had familiar smells.
How are you, Andy? All we need to know, Andy, is what are you doing in our country?
Part of a search and rescue team, which obviously wasn't the answer that they wanted.
Why are you lying? This can all be over, Andy. Talk to me. I want to help you. I am the only friend you have left.
Andy sticks to the patrol's cover story, that they're part of a search and rescue mission sent into Iraq to find downed pilots.
No more lies!
He's been trained never to admit being a member of the SAS.
Stop lying! We know you are lying! You are lying! Stop lying! Why are you doing this to yourself, Andy? Why? Tell us what you were doing here! Just tell us what we need to know. Just tell us what we need to know. You are lying. Tell us what you are doing here!
Now, at this point, I was suffering really badly from dehydration. My gums were all receding, my teeth were loose. On my body, there was pus coming out of my fingernails. My feet, there was pus oozing out of all the cuts. And I've smelled dead bodies before, and I could smell it on me. There was just this rotting stench.
Andy, tell us what you're doing.
It's our responsibility to hold off as long as possible with what we know. It's all about damage limitation.
Andy has to buy time for the other SAS patrols in Iraq to be withdrawn or redeployed.
And it's not that bad to do emotionally, purely because the people that you're talking about are people that you know. There's a guy in D Squadron, I come from B Squadron, I'm the godfather of his children. I might be responsible for him being dead. What I tried to be, in the beginning I was bluffing it, within the, 3 or 4 days. It was real, was just be a snivelling, low life, the grey man, you don't know where you are, what's going on, totally submissive. Because what you want to do is get to the stage where they think, well, why are we spending time and effort on this thing? Because what value is he?
Once I started walking that night, that's when the problems really started with hallucinations. And it would be like electric shock going through your head and somebody punching you really hard from behind. And then you get back up and just started walking again.
Dinger suffers the same routine of beatings as Andy until one day they're temporarily put in the same cell.
So when we was in the cell together, Dinger was able to tell me what happened to him and Legs after they crossed the Euphrates.
Stephen Lane, known as Legs, died on the day Andy was captured. After crossing the freezing 600-yard-wide Euphrates River, Legs collapsed. Knowing that only emergency medical treatment could save Legs, Dinger gave himself up and both were captured.
Steve Lane died at some stage after capture, and Dinger had been caught. We were getting bombed every night by Allied bombing. I had a talk with God once. He used to be in the top right-hand corner of the cell. And I said, well, if you get us out of this, I'll be your best mate. As far as I was concerned, that wasn't happening. So what I started doing was just screaming out, saying, well, just do it. Let's get it over and done with. I'm going to be dead soon. Let's just do it. And in fact, at that stage, Dinger was in the next cell screaming out, no, he's not. he's joking. And then I had a guy who came in who said he was a dentist from Guy's Hospital, which is one of London's major hospitals. This guy, fantastic English. I was told that what he was going to do was actually sort out my cracked molars at the back. And then he pulled out one of the segments on the right. Is that instant pain. One of the major things that got me through was thinking about my daughter. It was just actually fantasizing, walking with her, initially in the pram. Then I'll be walking her to her first school. Then we'd walk as she got older. Eventually walking in to getting married.
Then after about 5 days of this, the interrogators try a new approach.
You are all alone, Andy. You are going to die here.
They said, look, we've got members of your patrol in hospital. If you don't tell us what you've been doing, what you know and what you don't know, we're going to simply let the other people die.
It's up to you, Andy. You will be responsible for their deaths. They are your friends, aren't they? Let's stop wasting each other's time, eh?
Went back to the cell and then started to think about it. As far as I was concerned then, we'd fulfilled our requirement of giving that time for a damage limitation. What there is now, there's responsibility to ourselves. We fulfilled our requirement.
Andy then tells the Iraqis another lie, that his team is the reconnaissance element of a regular British infantry unit. During his entire imprisonment, he will never mention the SAS.
I'd come to the decision that I couldn't sit down anymore because I'd have to get up again, and once I got up, all the blood rushing back down the bottom of my feet, I've never felt pain like it in my life. It was excruciating. I would just start shuffling until my feet went numb again and then start walking. Well, after that night, I would just stop and put my rifle down and lean over my rifle, take a rest, and then carry on walking. It was too painful to sit down. As soon as the water became an issue, I was deteriorating very, very fast.
Despite Andy's false confession, the guards continue their brutal treatment.
It was the noise of them coming to the doors. Used to be scared, very scared indeed. Because they used to throw the bolt and unlock the lock, but they couldn't push the door open because the top of it used to jam. The noise of that used to be one of the most scariest things, and it still sort of affects me now. By then, you know, there was sort of, they've already sort of defecated on the floor, and it was all over the place. And I just used to curl up in it, hoping that they'd get bored and go to the next cell.
When I got close to the border, all I could see was a barbed wire fence. I managed to get across this obstacle, thinking I was still in Iraq. Then I collapsed and came to the next morning hallucinating about the members of the patrol. One of the guys shouted, "Hurry up, the guys are waiting for you." but I couldn't understand why I was in this state. And at that point, I knew things had gone too far. Once I started hallucinating, about guys in the squadron, I needed water. When I was walking up to that house, if I was in Iraq, I was going to kill everybody. A young guy came out and greeted me, and I just kept asking, is this Syria, Syria? And when I mentioned Iraq, he pointed over and he said, Iraq, there in the city here. And then he took me in, gave me some water. It was very clean, just fresh, just ice cold. It just tasted absolute heaven. And then I started to take my boots off to clean my feet out. He then brought me a little glass of sweet tea, which seemed to pick me straight up. We soon established that I needed to see the police. They then dressed me up in Arab clothes and took me out to the vehicle. I was talking to them, but they wouldn't say anything. We drove for about an hour or so, and we came out to an area in the open desert. There was 2 Mercedes parked there, and there was a group of guys at the back, and one of them was mucking around with a pistol. Pulled me out of the vehicle, pushed me down. And I was aware of a guy walking around at the back of me, and that's where, I just thought they brought me out here to execute me. And then they lifted me up and then put me into one of the backs of the Mercedes, and then we drove off.
Nobody will ever know why the Syrians, members of the Allied coalition, treated Chris in that way. Perhaps years of anti-Western sentiment could not be washed away overnight.
A lot of the guys that live around the borders, their cousins would have been Iraqis, and, obviously official policy was to help coalition forces, but they may not have agreed with that. I think any psychological problems I had were caused from them events. I had during my 7 days escape and evasion, I had an aim and a goal to achieve, to get over the border, and then I thought I'd be safe. And then all of a sudden I'm faced with possible execution. I think psychologically the damage was done there.
Now transferred to a more regular military prison, Andy and Dinger get to talk to their South African colleague Mal.
Mal!
He had been captured soon after he left Chris in the desert. None of them know that, in fact, Chris has already made it to the Syrian capital, Damascus.
I think one of the brightest moments of the Gulf War is when the SAS survivor showed up deep in Syria. You talk about individual courage and dedication. He was all our hero.
The Syrians hand Chris over to the British embassy, and he's flown back to the SAS base in Saudi Arabia. In the days since the Bravo 20 patrol has been sent into Iraq, the coalition deployed a joint Anglo-US Special Operations Task Force, led by General Wayne Downing, to continue the war against the Scuds.
I met Chris Ryan shortly after he came out. He came out to our operational base, debriefed me, and then I had him debrief one of our patrols that was going in because he had such great information.
The knowledge gained from the experience of the first Bravo patrols and details passed on by Chris Ryan mean that only vehicle-mounted teams are now sent into Iraq. That the terrain and weather are far more hostile than originally feared, and that the Bedouin herdsmen pose a real threat to the special forces units that follow Bravo 20. Over the next weeks, several more SAS and U.S. teams hunt Scuds throughout western Iraq.
Stand by, we're looking. 3 launchers plus associated vehicles by the burning light. Bombs away, bombs away. 3-7, you got them now, we're going home.
It has never been documented how many, if any, mobile Scud launchers the combined Special Forces bomber operations destroyed.
Prior to the SAS going behind enemy lines and helping us put air power at least in the vicinity of the Scud launches, we had on average 5 Scud launches a night. After they came into it, we averaged 1 Scud launch a night for the remainder of the war. Now, to me, that is significant.
Crucially, Israel never intervened in the war, so the Scud-busting mission did succeed in the end. Even if it did get off to a shaky start.
God bless Bravo 20. Whenever you're the first one in, it is the unknown. Once they go in, things that are unknown become known. Had we put an American Bravo 20 in there before the Brits, we'd have had the same thing happen. The same thing.
The Allies have just stopped firing in the Gulf War. Thousands of Iraqis have been taken prisoner. Many more have been killed in the fighting.
This is not a time of euphoria, but it is a time of pride. Pride in our troops, pride in the friends who stood with us in the crisis.
As part of the ceasefire agreement following the swift coalition victory in the 100-hour land war, all prisoners of war are released. Now on his way home, a surprise awaits Andy at Baghdad airport.
So I went down, and there was Mike, lying in bed, which was wonderful,
It is the first time Andy has seen Mike Coburn since that fateful night by the Euphrates River almost 6 weeks before, when he'd seen his friend gunned down. After being shot in the arm and leg, Mike had been held in an Iraqi prison hospital. Andy and Mike leave Baghdad as they arrived, anonymously. After months of treatment, Mike Coburn stayed in the SAS regiment for several years before retiring to civilian life. South African-born Mal also continued to serve in the SAS after the Gulf War before retiring. Both now work in the security business. Dinger remains on active service in the regiment and cannot be identified. Three members of the patrol did not make it home. Sergeant Vince Phillips, a veteran soldier with 9 years service in the SAS, died of hypothermia that first night on the run.
Well, I wish he was alive here today. But, you know, as a brother, a son to my parents, he was one of the best. He had 2 daughters, which he thought the world of, little Lucy and Sharon. Vince died for Queen, country, and his regiment.
Stephen Legs Lane died of exposure after swimming the Euphrates with Dinger. Also a husband and father, he was posthumously awarded the Military Medal. The youngest member of the team, Bob Consiglio, had been in the regiment for less than a year. He died fighting a rearguard action, covering the patrol's withdrawal. Buried in the regimental cemetery in Hereford, England, he was also posthumously awarded the Military Medal for his bravery.
Bob was in my troop and I was devastated. He'd ate his last meal in the United Kingdom in my house before we left. He was a likeable guy and he was a brave man, and it was quite hard to accept.
I'm very proud of the patrol and in my role in it. On that job, as the commander, I've made decisions. Some were good, some were bad. Majority of people survived, which was more important to me personally than achieving the mission.
The whole patrol was a disaster from the beginning to the end, and we all made mistakes, right from, the head right down to the lowest ranking member of the patrol. It's affected every member of the patrol in one way or another. From my side, I've got there's physical scars, there's dreams. You'll see something or smell something, it'll fire it back, and you get dreams, flashbacks. I had to make some harsh decisions when I was out there. 3 members of the patrol were killed. So, them memories will always be strong and they stay with me.